The old man's shoulders trembled long before anyone noticed the tears. Morning joggers streamed past, dogs tugged on leashes, coffee cups steamed in the cool air. Life moved, fast and indifferent, around the lonely figure on the weathered park bench. To most, he was simply a shadow in the morning haze. Another stranger, another story no one had time to hear. But that changed the moment the tall man in a charcoal coat stepped off the paved path, slowed his stride, and quietly took a seat beside him. What followed would echo far beyond Brookside Park. Thomas Avery had been visiting that bench nearly every morning for almost a year, ever since the accident, the one that took his wife Margaret so suddenly. The world had lost its edges. His days felt suspended, blurry, each one as hollow as the last. And yet he returned to the bench, the pond, the ducks, because it was the last place where life still felt connected to the woman he loved. People in the community knew of him, though not deeply. They'd seen his hunched frame, his distant gaze, his hands wrapped around a paper cup long after the coffee cooled. They recognized grief, but from a polite distance. But on one particularly cold Tuesday morning, something different happened. Thomas barely noticed the man approaching, and not until he sat down, unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. The stranger didn't introduce himself, didn't speak, didn't seek attention. He simply sat. It took Thomas several seconds to turn his head, and when he did, recognition jolted through him. The man beside him was Senator Daniel Kennedy, one of the nation's most watched political figures, known for his calm speeches and grounded presence. A man constantly surrounded by reporters, security, and noise. Yet here he was, alone, quiet, sitting beside a grieving stranger on a cold bench. Thomas blinked, unsure of what to say. Kennedy offered a small nod, not breaking the gentle silence between them. For a moment, the world seemed to still. Finally, Thomas whispered, "My wife and I used to sit here. I keep thinking she'll walk up again, but she never does." His voice cracked at the edges, as though dusted with months of unshed tears. Kennedy didn't respond with polished sympathy. He didn't reach for comforting copyright-esque. He simply listened fully, respectfully, like Thomas's pain was the only thing in the world that mattered. After a long moment, Kennedy spoke softly. "Loss doesn't leave on its own. It waits for someone to sit with it." Thomas let out a breath that sounded more like a sob. "I don't know how to move on. I don't know how to be anything without her." "You don't have to move on," Kennedy said. "You just have to keep moving. And sometime as a broken bar you need someone to walk with you." There was something in Kennedy's voice, not pity, but understanding. A quiet take. Thomas sensed that the senator wasn't speaking theoretically. He was speaking from his own shadows. As the minutes passed, Thomas began sharing pieces of Margaret, her laugh, her stubbornness, her love for the ducks they'd feed on the very pond before them. He spoke haltingly at first, then with more warmth, as though Kennedy's presence cracked open something he had kept sealed. Kennedy shared nothing about himself publicly, but he spoke gently of times when he, too, had felt swallowed by sorrow. He didn't compare wounds, he simply allowed his own scars to meet Thomas's. People passing by began slowing their pace, sensing a rare tenderness unfolding. Many recognized Kennedy, their eyes widening as they searched the park for cameras or aides. But there were none. No staff, no entourage, just a grieving man and someone who cared enough to notice. When Thomas admitted he hadn't eaten breakfast, hadn't felt hungry in days, Kennedy stood and extended a hand. "Then let's get something warm." They walked slowly to the cafe, told the copyright across the street, side by side, their steps almost synchronized. Inside, the barista blinked in surprise at the sight of the senator helping Thomas remove his coat, guiding him to a corner table like a friend rather than a public figure. They ate. They talked about small things this time of the weather, books, the ducks, and when they returned to the park, a small, respectful crowd had gathered, not encroaching, just witnessing something deeply human. Thomas hesitated, uncomfortable under the sudden attention, but Kennedy placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "They're here because kindness draws people," he said, "and you showed courage today." "Courage?" Thomas whispered. "You shared your grief," Kennedy replied. "That's one of the bravest things anyone can do." As they prepared to part ways, Thomas finally asked the question weighing on him. "Senator, or a broken bar, why did you sit with me?" Kennedy's answer was soft enough that only Thomas heard. "Because someone once sat with me when I needed it, and it changed my life." Thomas felt his throat tighten, and not with despair, but with hope. Real, warm hope. As Kennedy walked away, the crowd slowly dispersed, but the feeling lingered. The quiet reminder that in a world rushing past itself, the simplest act of sitting down, listening, being present still carries the power to save someone. And on that cold Tuesday morning, a lonely man wasn't lonely anymore.